Before white settlement in 1795, the Georges River district was occupied by the Ganangara and Darawal Aboriginal communities, and their children were educated using a range of methods including demonstration, storytelling, rock art and face-to-face teaching.
Traditionally, Aboriginal people were given the skills needed to survive in a hunter-gatherer society. Basically, the children were taught by the elders of the group, and of course the education system was based on passing of knowledge through oral methods rather than the written method as we know it today. But with the coming of the British, when they came here with a different view of what is education.
After white settlement, the first schools to be opened were generally small church-run establishments. Several of these operated around Liverpool in the early 1800s. In 1853, the first school in the Bankstown area, St Felix in Chapel Road, was opened by the Sisters of St Joseph. Their aim was
to establish schools in the more remote parts of the colony to provide a Catholic education for the poorer children.
Earlier schools had mainly provided for the wealthier classes. In 1862, the Church of England opened a school in St Matthew's Church Hall at Yagoona, with the teacher doubling as the local postmaster. He was paid £60 per year, but in the beginning had only 4 pupils. In 1868, a Mr Louis Alexander complained about this to the Council of Education.
I respectfully beg to ask you, how much longer is the finances of the country to be frittered away with so much humbug?
Later in 1868, the school, still housed in the little weatherboard church hall, became known as Bankstown Public School. In April 1880, the school moved into a new 2-room brick schoolhouse, closer to the centre of Bankstown, which was then around Liverpool and Rookwood roads. The new schoolmaster was Dugald MacLeod.
He was very strict, and yet with a good sense of humour. He was a very polite gentleman. It was well known around the district, amongst the other schools, that if any teacher had a recalcitrant pupil, anyone troublesome or playing up, he was threatened with, "I'll send you down to Mr MacLeod's school if you don't behave yourself." And I understand that the response was always very positive.
Only 2 years after opening, the schoolhouse developed dangerous cracks and part of it had to be demolished and rebuilt. For 5 months, lessons were held in a tent. Dugald MacLeod was headmaster until he retired in 1912, and the school continued to operate at that location until 1928. The site is now MacLeod's Reserve, but all that remains of the school and the teachers' residence is the well.
If you were the headmaster of the school, you were one of the principals of the town. I'll always remember Mr MacLeod. I'll always remember his name.
In 1894, Miss Jessie Thompson opened a small private school on her father's Ferndale estate in Revesby, but the school closed in 1904 when Miss Thompson moved away. The second state school to be built in the area was Revesby Public, which opened in 1896. In 1900, the headmaster lamented,
"If only the parents would send their children more regularly. They invariably keep them home on Friday."
Friday was market day, and the parents needed help to get their farm produce to Belmore markets. Revesby Public School has retained its original building from 1896, and it's still used today. Regent's Park opened in 1899 as Potts Hill, with 2 rooms and 52 pupils. The opening of the railway line to Bankstown in 1909 caused a rapid growth of population in the area, to over 6,000 by 1915, with a similar effect on the local schools. It also caused the centre of Bankstown to shift away from Liverpool Road. Bankstown Central opened in 1915, and by 1929 it was the largest school in Australia, New Zealand or Canada, and was larger than any public school in England or Scotland. It began as a primary school, but later incorporated the first 2 years of high school, known as super primary.
I went to the Bankstown school in about 1921, 22. In the infant stage, it was together. The girls was always segregated on one particular building, and we were segregated, the boys in the other. And the classes in those days too, there was no 25, 30 people in the class. Some classes I was in, there were 60 students in the class and what have you, with the one teacher. Some classrooms had fires in them, which us boys used to, in the brick building, used to have fires there. Well, we was delegated to light the fire each morning, so different days, different boys used to do it. So we'd light the fires up so they had a bit of warmth. Sometimes the wood was that wet and what have you, you couldn't even light them, so you sat there and shivered.
When the First World War ended, many returned soldiers were settled on poultry farms and market gardens at Milperra. In 1918, a public school was opened, but it closed immediately because of an outbreak of flu. It reopened in 1919. Children travelled to school on foot, by horse or by sulky, and in the Revesby area there was a horse-drawn bus.
Children didn't have their parents to take them to school. There were no cars, and very few were lucky enough to have a sulky. So usually everywhere we went we walked. Wet days, there'd be mud puddles to walk through, and we took our shoes off. Some children went barefoot nearly all the time, but we did have shoes and wore them when it was dry, but when it rained we took them off and walked and put them on when we got to school to save them from getting wet. Frosty mornings, it was icy all over the paddocks in those days.
We used to have a goat, and I used to peg it out on the way to school.
Greenacre Public School, originally known as Bankstown East, opened in 1921. Bass Hill Public School opened in 1923. In 1924, Bankstown North opened, replacing Dugald MacLeod's original school. At this time, St Felix School was taking boarders from the country, as well as teaching the local Catholic children. Lessons were held in the church.
During the school days, a very big screen, wooden screen, was pulled across the altar so that it was just a school. Also, the church was divided into 3 rooms by big sliding wooden screens from floor to ceiling.
1928 saw the beginning of technical education in the area, with the opening of Belmore North Trade School. It ran courses at night using part-time teachers. During the day, the buildings were used by Belmore Junior Technical School. Padstow Park Public School, surrounded by bush, opened in 1929. 1929 to 1933 are the official years of the Depression in Australia, but its effects were felt until well into the 1930s. Men were thrown out of work and onto the dole, and families struggled to survive. Several schools in the area began to provide soup at lunchtime so that the children could get some nourishment.
Clothing was the main thing, wasn't it, during the Depression? Everybody lived in hand-me-down clothes. As somebody grew out of something, most mothers in those days could sew, didn't they? Yes. And everybody made alterations to the garments and that so that they fitted the next children coming along.
During the Depression, about 1930, and nobody had any money, so the teacher sent around, the headmistress sent around to and asked all the children that couldn't afford school books, like exercise books, we got our textbook, exercise books, to stand up. And well, nearly all the class stood up. But we would have loved to have been sitting down.
In 1931, Bankstown West opened at the Progress Association Hall in Bankstown, known locally as the Pig and Whistle.
We had an old 2-room ramshackle sort of a schoolroom. It was divided into 2. I think the girls were one side and the boys were the other side. Boys wear no shoes, and the girls were lucky to have a pair of shoes, I suppose, in those days. We had a terrible storm, windstorm, and the old Pig and Whistle was blown down.
As a result, Bankstown West finally got a new school building, and it's still used today. In 1937, East Hills Public School opened, temporarily housed in an old dance hall. It's now Panania Public School. At this time, there were very few people of non-English speaking background in the area. Those who did arrive received a cautious welcome.
The hard part, I think, was being different and trying to do so much to prove yourself.
The biggest problem I had, of course, was that nobody in the school understood me. I was the only Italian in the class. I went to a Catholic school, and they'd tell you to do something, and of course when you came to school the next day and you didn't do it, you were in trouble.
There were a few Aboriginal children at Bankstown North School. They lived in the area, people knew them, and
they were just ordinary people.
They were just taken for granted.
Mm.
I can remember that the day that World War II was declared and the teachers came and told us, but it didn't make a great deal of impression on me. But of course, as the years went on and our friends had brothers and dads and so forth going away to the war.
During World War II, Bankstown Aerodrome was considered to be a target for air raids, so schools in the vicinity took all necessary precautions. Wardens were sworn in, air raid shelters were built, and windows were covered to protect the children from flying glass.
Horrible slit trenches that were always full of water. We'd have drowned if we'd have had to get into them.
But one of the big highlights during the early war years was the invasion of Bankstown by the American soldiers.
We had endless little concerts for the war effort, and everything that we did at high school was dominated by the war or war shortages or whatever. And all the time we were conscious of how lucky we were that we weren't being bombed.
2 new infant schools opened during the war years. George's Hall in 1942 and Chester Hill in 1945. After the war, the Bankstown area experienced another period of rapid growth as returned soldiers and European migrants settled in the area. Bankstown's population increased by roughly 10,000 people per year, with no less than 26 schools opening between 1950 and 1959. The brave new world of post-war Australia had produced a strong interest in education, and many of these schools were opened as a result of parental agitation. Mothers joined mothers' clubs, while fathers tended the school grounds on weekends, and parents and citizens associations took a keen interest in the running of the schools.
Parents too were very keen for their children to have education, and made sure that the kiddies didn't play truant. I doubt whether there was any truancy then. They seemed to like to come to school.
In 1959, Belmore Junior Technical School achieved full high school status, with the last technical classes being held in 1966. The post-war influx of migrants had a dramatic effect on the local schools. Almost overnight, enrolments at George's Hall Public School increased by around 100 children, which meant that half the pupils were migrant children. The second major intake of migrant population to affect Bankstown was during the 1970s, when refugees began arriving from the Middle East. Today, schools like Greenacre Public, 55% Arabic, and Banksia Road, 40% Arabic, reflect this period. As the population continued to grow, more schools were built to meet the need. The late 1970s, early 1980s saw another wave of migration as Vietnamese people came to the Bankstown area. In recent years, and not without some controversy and opposition, several nationalities have established schools based in their own culture and religion. Organised special education in the Bankstown area began in 1965 in the Whitehall Nursing Home in Revesby. In 1966, 3 classes were established at the old Bankstown Boys High School.
36 children, no furniture, no equipment, nothing. The local school of Bankstown, seeing our plight, approached all of the other schools within the district, and they provided toys and books and things like that for us to get together, to get going.
1975 saw the opening of the new Caroline Chisholm School.
The new buildings were a godsend. Here we had 60 pupils, a teacher for each classroom, and 5 teachers' aides. We were very fortunate in that the people around the district came to our aid and helped us, and have taken Caroline Chisholm under their wing.
Later, 2 other schools were opened, Gillawarner and Broderick House.
Special education here encompasses children learning basic life skills, and that incorporates their mobility programs, working on movement, walking skills, and that goes right across the day in all environments.
The Special Education Unit at Bankstown South Infant School takes children with developmental difficulties.
I'm finished with the crowds.
5 times 20.
In 1966, a school was established at Bankstown Hospital to provide lessons for children who are hospitalised for any length of time. Construction of Bankstown Technical College began in 1950, and classes began in 1952. In 1969, new buildings were opened, and in 1984, the college became Bankstown College of TAFE. By 1995, over 12,000 students were enrolled, over 60% of them from non-English speaking backgrounds, and the college now offers a very wide range of courses. Padstow TAFE opened in 1981 and is now one of only 2 metropolitan colleges offering a horticulture program. It also accommodates the Aeroskills Centre, which offers courses in aircraft engineering. In 1887, Dugald MacLeod ran evening classes for adults in North Bankstown, and adult education has continued in one form or another since that time. The strong interest in education which followed World War II also gave a boost to adult education. Bankstown Evening College began in 1950 with a staff of 12 and 300 students attending 16 classes. It now offers more than 200 daytime and evening courses with over 6,000 enrolments per year. Bankstown Boys High has now become Bankstown Senior College, which caters for people over the normal school age who return to school to improve their literacy or to complete the school certificate or the higher school certificate. The Milperra College of Advanced Education began operation in July 1975, catering primarily for teacher education, with an enrolment of 270 students. In the early 1980s, it was upgraded to an Institute of Higher Education, and the name was changed to Macarthur. Campbelltown campus opened in 1987. In 1988, the University of Western Sydney was formed, made up of Hawkesbury Agricultural College and Nepean CAE. In 1989, Macarthur joined the network. Today there are almost 7,000 students enrolled at the University of Western Sydney, Macarthur, and courses have expanded to include health, business and technology, arts and social sciences, and law. Education in the Bankstown area has come a long way. From lessons held in tents and church halls to modern schools, colleges and university campuses. From inkwells and nibs, blackboards and chalk to computers and satellite broadcasts. From so much humbug to an educational system which caters for many cultures, many age groups and an incredibly diverse range of needs. And it's still expanding. This is our heritage of learning, and this is only the beginning.